Welcome to the Huffing Spirit Podcast, where we take you from the sacred to the profane, from the serious to the silly, from the outer to the inner, and from the guru back to you. Join your playful podcast guides, Alex Hindley and Natalie Dick, as they bring you back to a grounded and more authentic approach to spirituality.
Welcome back to the Huffing Spirit Podcast. We have an amazing guest. I'm going to let Alex introduce to us today.
Yes, I'm very excited, if you guys can't tell. We're talking with Tony Holmes, aka the Love Warrior. Tony is a pleasure activist, facilitator, shamanic practitioner, DEI consultant, yoga therapist, DACA mediator, and officiant. His mission is to help bring humanity back into balance, and he facilitates HAI workshops for diversity training in the Nova Collective, which is a global woman, Black, queer-owned consulting firm, and Tony's specialization is in shamanic massage and ceremony. He's also founded the Society for Healing Arts Institutes, loves connecting in play and vulnerability. I've personally seen him work. He's amazing and a marvel to watch. He's an amazing father, brother, space holder. He's someone I admire and respect, and truly is doing the work in love. And to connect you both, Natalie and Tony, you both are the ones I reached out to when I realized I went to a massage parlor and not a massage therapist.
Oh.
You were both the text were like, you 100% went to a massage parlor.
Yeah, you went to the wrong place. You didn't go to a place like Tony's.
No, I did not.
It's a different therapy.
Yeah. So Tony, that was an incredible intro, Alex. And
thank you.
You know, I have to say, I've been to you personally, Tony. I've had a session in your studio in Evanston, correct? We're in Evanston.
Yeah.
And it was truly remarkable. Like you're so gifted. So we kind of want to turn it over to you and let you kind of dive into who Tony Holmes is.
Wow. Thank you. Well, I was born a small Black child.
Yeah.
No, I was really thank you, Alex, for the introduction, and thank you, Natalie. I'm honored to be talking with you both. And I have to say that when I heard your first couple of episodes of this podcast, and I was really I want to say shook in the sense that you were asking all of the great and hard questions, and the questions that like I have to ask myself as a practitioner to make sure that I'm staying in alignment, with who I say I am. And those kinds of questions are the grist of it, the practice, I think, for me. And so in long story short, I would say I'm a person who's experienced pain, trauma, some brokenness, and the things that have been healing for me are the things that I'm also wanting to offer. And I believe that can be true it's my belief that it can be true for everyone, that like our wounds as we heal can be like antenna to draw others toward us so we can heal together in a certain an intimacy that goes beyond words. Wow.
Yeah. And I love that you said that, because it's like our wounds are the radar for others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I first heard that from the infamous Kurt.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
And I can definitely relate to that wounding and that trauma. I think we've all got variations of what we've all been through. And can you talk a little bit more about how that has shown up in your work?
Sure. Well, I would just say, for people who are like wondering, like, what does that mean? Like, our wounds are the radar for others.
Yeah.
So personally, when I was going through a divorce, it was one of the hardest times of my life. And when the topic came up, I would notice like an internal feeling that I would have. But I could also feel in the room other people who have been affected by divorce without them raising their hand and going, "Oh, me too, I've had that experience," or a similar experience, because sometimes you can just feel it. Mm-hmm. And that's what I mean by, partly what I mean by that radar, that frequency that we emit, and can connect on. And I think I just lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
Okay.
Tony, when did you know that like you were different and that you kind of had the abilities that you do have?
Well, I've always been a Scorpio, so attracted to love, sex, and death.
Ooh, I love that. I love sex and death.
But
Right.
what else is there besides taxes?
Yeah, love, sex, death, and taxes. I think I kind of ran away from it for a long time. I have been attracted. I mean, the funny thing is I grew up in a house in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And in the furnace room of the basement, there were some books from early 19th century or early 1900s that were old witchcraft books. And I was like, yeah, I know. And I'm like,
Cool.
this house that was built in the 50s, and me as a 6-year-old kind of like reading these things and like, oh, like, so I always had sort of a magical thinking that I believed for a long time. I mean, and it kind of moved through, and it kind of moved into fantasy and like thinking I was a superhero and believing that, and then
forgetting and then believing
and then
again.
forget exactly. Yeah, exactly. There was and then being drawn to the intuitive, and whether it was like, oh, we're going to learn about ESP or some of these things, like dabbling. But then I, as a 19-year-old who had gotten frustrated with high school, I dropped out of high school as a senior, took a year off and tested into college. But in that in-between year, I was trying to study all of the things that were hidden. And so I was kind of doing a little dive into the occult, and started to have some experiences and some phenomena that were scary to me. And that was one of the first real existential, like, who am I and where am I? Am I going to hell? Like, those kinds of things were big. And it was through spirituality that that began to heal. And it was my foundational religious practice was non-denominational. Well, it was Baptist Christian and then non-denominational Christian. And I still hold Christ as a teacher, and I don't want to go off track here too much, but really found that there was some value in New Age, and started to incorporate some of these things in. And so even as I was calling myself a Christian and having some more intuitive experiences that were coming forward, I was like, okay, well, if I'm meant to have these, let me use them in the best way. And the quick little funny story was my first job in Chicago. When I came to Columbia College, there was an ad in the Reader for phone psychic, and I applied for it.
Oh my God, this is amazing. I love it. Keep going. I love it.
Yeah.
There's so much that I don't know about you, and I can't wait to find out, Tony.
Yeah.
Dang it. Well, I can yammer on. And so, all right. Well, they called me and they're like, okay, we're going to test you. Have you ever given readings before? And I was like, no, but I can feel people's emotions. And if I feel into them, I can kind of tell where they're coming from. And it was very much with that same kind of question mark, where they're coming from, and like not knowing really, but feeling into it. And
yeah, the guy who was running a phone psychic hotline is asking tough hitting questions of where your psychic abilities are coming from.
Yeah. It's like he's got the gotcha.
Yeah, those fake ones, aren't you?
You're right. And so he's like, okay, well, give me a reading. And it was this company out of Arizona, and it was big when the 900 psychic line was like big at the time. And I was like, okay, well, tell me your full name 3 times, and then tell me the first color that pops in your head. And he did. And the first images that came into my mind were seeing a hand with a scar across it. And he's like, which hand? And I was like, it's the left, no, the right. And he's like, okay. And he's like, what else? And I saw like a hawk's head, and I saw some other things. I was feeling into his own questioning his own like career choice. And he said, well, when I was 10, I fell out of a tree and my right arm is shorter than my left. And the hawk is my spirit guide. And he's like, you're pretty accurate, but you were not sure enough. So I'm not going to pass you right now. I'm going to suggest that you read the book Dianetics, and then we'll call you in a month. And I was like, okay. And I got off the phone and I was like, I'm not going to freaking read Dianetics. And because I just was, that's the inner rebel in me. I was like, no. And so
don't tell me what to do.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. As our friend and mentor, Kurt Hill, knows all too well. but a friend of mine said, well, Tony, why don't you pray to your guardian angels to connect with their other person's guardian angels and let only the things that need to come through. And I was like, okay, I'll try that. And the company called me again, and it was a woman on the phone this time. And they're like, are you ready for your reading? And so I went into it and connected with her sister, who, long story short, tuned into the fact that she was at home taking care of their aging mother, and their sister was traveling. And so she passed me. I took some calls for a while, and I was like still feeling in. Like one of the first calls I got was, oh, well, I'm getting sentenced tomorrow. What's the judge going to say? And I was like, I can't tell you what the judge is going to say. We can talk about, what's that?
Like the finite, definitive answers that people
yeah.
are like, the black or white. Not,
yeah.
And that's so hard to, when you're tapping into intuition, there's a lot of gray.
You could be like, look, I'm getting a sense of guilt. I can't tell if it's non-guilty or just guilty.
Right. I see you in a courtroom. Like, I don't know. And I was like, I can talk to you about why you're getting sentenced, and they're like, okay, thanks, click. And, which I understand at $3.99 a minute, why waste time? And then I got a call from this person who was going to the New Orleans Jazz Fest and was wondering if she was going to get her bonus payout in time, and was going on a date with this guy. And we were talking, and it just popped out of my mouth. I was like, that's for 6127 or something like that. She was like, that's exactly the number. Oh my gosh. And I surprised myself, like with just the number of the bonus popping out. And I was like, okay, there's something here. And I did the phone psychic thing for a little while, and then
I love that.
Yeah.
I think if there was a phone psychic opportunity gifted to me in my 20s, I would have jumped on it. 100%.
Sure.
Because I've like same with me. Like I've always been very sensitive to energy and in tune with it, and I do believe a lot of that does come from trauma and our ability to always like kind of hypervigilant in a way to read a room or feel things in this extra perceptual way. But yeah, I would have loved to dive. I would have loved that journey. That would have been so fun.
I would have loved to have been a phone sex operator.
Well, it's not too late.
I'm gonna get off this podcast right now.
Yeah. Alex's new adventure is phone sex operator.
What are you wearing, Alex?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
I got some holes in my jeans, Tony.
Oh.
Use your abilities, figure out where they are.
Both pant legs.
Damn, you're good.
Phone psychic.
Phone psychic coming in hot. Phone psychic
coming in hot.
I love it. So Tony, so after the phone psychic journey, how did you kind of stumble? I mean, I know it's probably a long story of how you accumulated all these different modalities and experiences. What did you ever get off track of that?
Oh yeah. So I was feeling the spirituality, and also was an actor and waiter, and I was engaged to my wife at the time, and we were going to yoga classes, and the yoga instructor was like, I think you can do this, and so suggested I do their yoga teacher training. And I think that saved my life in some ways, because it was a practice of connecting to myself, and that was and that was really one of the first like get in there because I was also like partying hard, doing lots of drinking and, you know, substances. And I think I would have been careening a lot more without the yoga. And then I want to say a couple things real quick. So as I became a yoga instructor, I was invited to do the yoga portion of this retreat where they were doing yoga and drumming and trance, holotropic breathing. And that's where I met Kurt Hill and Michael Taylor. We all met for the first time at this retreat, and that was like in '98. And I saw Kurt do some amazing healing, like hands off, like where he was standing behind this person sitting in the chair, and the person's arm was hurting, and he made a gesture over the person's arm while their eyes were closed. And it was like watching a marionette on a string, like moving this person's arm without touching it. And I was like, wow, I want to learn how to do what you're doing.
Whoa.
And yeah, so that was the first little kind of inkling. And that was like really began to shape, like, maybe I do have some this path is worth pursuing. And I met Bhagavan Das, who is the person who Ram Dass or Richard Alpert followed around in India. And he was in Chicago doing readings at this place that no longer exists called Healing Earth Bookstore. And
was that Eric's bookshop?
No, it wasn't Eric's bookshop. But it was a kind of a big emporium of New Age, all things New Age. And so he came in, and in the reading, he said, you would be a good Tantra instructor. And I was like, really? And I was like, he's like, yeah. I was like, okay, well, initiate me. And I still had, and he gave me a mantra, and I would practice it, but I still had some religiosity from the Christian faith that was like bouncing against that. So it was still kind of cooking in there. And then I really went off track when I was like, had gotten married, and I was like, I'm tired of being a starving artist. I want to make some money. And I got into real estate, and the bubble was happening, and it was like booming. And so I went in, I was making money within a short amount of time. But yet I was working like 80 hours a week. And we could barely get email on our phones, but believe me, we had the latest like Palm device, or what was the BlackBerry?
The Ping, the Messenger. I loved that when I was in corporate.
Yeah, and I felt so important,
Right. Yeah.
But I also told my wife, I was like, I'm not happy. I was happier as a starving artist. And then the market crashed, and I went through my dark night of the soul, and then all of the things that started to come together. I started working more intently with Kurt, and he had started this group prior to APCT called the Magical Eight, and we would study phenomenology. APCT was still going on, but it was sort of like a small interest group of folks that would get together. And I started doing these high workshops on love, intimacy, and sexuality when I was feeling broken and unlovable. And that helped me to consider that perhaps I am worthy of love and can be my own companion through my life, no matter what. So that's why I'm my own husband, and I wear my own wedding band.
I love that.
Awesome.
I really relate to that, because divorce, I mean, I've just recently, like not recently, but 3 years, been through a divorce, and it was as best as it could be, but very isolating. And I love that, because I think only now am I just starting to really anchor in and fully love myself. Like it's a journey. It is a full-on journey of really getting grounded in yourself and comfortable with yourself, and not needing anybody, but just fully loving yourself. It's a trip. It is.
It is. Yeah. It can shake down to the foundation of like what's happening.
Yeah.
Because we're told it's supposed to look like this, and when it doesn't look like that, naturally we can be like, well, what's wrong with me? And yeah.
Why do you both, as practitioners, why do you both feel that like that's a trap that we all fall into, that we don't feel that we're deserving or can even begin to accept the love for ourselves? Where do you guys think that comes from?
I'll let you dig into this one, Tony.
Well, I think it's like a couple of things. I think one is that we're told, we kind of have this idea of like, how are you? I'm fine. And so everything's fine. And it's like this shiny sort of exterior. And we're encouraged to cultivate that as we grow older, and we begin to tamp down the things that feel messy, the emotions, the parts that aren't polished. And so then we internalize the parts that aren't polished or maybe exile, those parts and keep the shiny parts and it can be this real dichotomy, shiny on the outside and rotten feeling on the inside. And until we can empty that stuff out, I think that opens the way for accepting and healing. What do you think?
100%. And I think diving into the deeper parts that are, like you said, those messy, cringy parts of ourselves that we deem unlovable or that we want to fragment and put in the side and just forget about, and we only want to position the shiny parts of ourselves, like the good, that's often what can be, for me, what is represented in a relationship.
That plays well with others' parts.
Yeah, it's like, how do I fit and look good in this template, right? Here's this template of what's supposed to make me happy, but there's all of this stuff on the inside of me that's being neglected and tended to. And then when you get out of that relationship, you're left with the messy parts, and you have to go in yourself and recover them and love them and hold them. And that for me that's been a really beautiful journey, because I've never really had true depth and intimacy with myself before marriage.
I love that. And I'm also hearing like often we'll exchange tending to those feelings in ourselves, those messy feelings, in exchange for belonging. See, I belong. I belong. I'm part of the tribe. I deserve a seat around the fire.
Yep.
And if I'm not around the fire, then that could mean death.
100%. And it's in that, through divorce, in that isolation, which is I can say I have felt the depth of loneliness and isolation, especially during the pandemic. That was a very scary thing for me. I was like, I've never felt so alone. But it's in that loneliness and that darkness where you find those little specks of light. Eventually, for me, that was my journey. But I felt like being kicked at, like leaving the marriage, but then I was kind of on the outside of society, right? Like not connected is a big, big, big wound.
Big fear. It sounds like the dark night of the soul. Like
that was my dark night of the soul.
I hear that. Yeah.
Do you feel like there's lots of dark nights of the souls, or is there only one that a human can experience?
I feel like there are lots. Lots. Yeah. Like
I think
sometimes, sometimes people can be working in a very, superficial strata of society, but their dark night of the soul is still an existential crisis. Like, am I fit for this? Am I worthy of this? I feel like those, when we do crack, is when we can finally let go of all of the holding the failure and I've tried so hard to do it right, and all of those things. And even though we may have, I don't know, I keep wanting to swear, and I'm not
you
going
can swear on this podcast.
Oh, okay.
No holds barred.
Okay.
Oh, fucking crazy.
You heard me talk a bunch. I'm like the patron saint of profanity.
The podcast is really about, we go from the sacred to the profane, so go balls to the wall, swear all
I love it. So even though we may carry around these things that are like I fucked up, I'm fucked up. Like, we take on these identities, these personas, and then we begin to live them out. And until we hit that crack that, that wall or the container of our life cracks, then all of that shit can like, we can just let it go, and without even having to know what's next, can then begin to be like, oh, well, maybe I am worthy of at least being connected to, or worthy of love, or I'm then vulnerable, so then I can experience intimacy. Because without that vulnerability, it's all just surfacey, the armor and the protecting ourselves, and it becomes transactional, and we're never really connecting, and so that's, I think, one of the reasons why I'm drawn toward the shamey, the cringy parts, nude yoga. Teaching nude yoga when I was going through my divorce was a big healing thing for me. Like,
wow, I want to hear about this. Okay, tell us about that.
Sure. It was I'd been teaching yoga. I had gone away from it with real estate, and then as the market was crashing and I was heading in toward my dark night of the soul, I was like, I need something. And one of my mentors, who was a very strict, like prudish, like disciplined yogi, and also gay man, was holding these men's yoga classes, and he let me know. He's like, I'm thinking about doing these nude yoga classes, and I went to one for the first time, and oh wow, it was just being in the room where there was these soft pools of light, and people had their own space, but I could feel I'm trying to find the words of being supported while being naked, feeling into my own masculinity. One of the conflicts in my marriage was around my sexuality. I've been out as bisexual since I was 22, so that's over 30 years now. Wow. And my wife knew at the time, but it was still stuff that we were unpacking. And so being in this space where I could be naked but not have any focus on being sexual or connecting with anyone else, in the final relaxation, I felt this. It was the first time I'd had an emotional release where I felt like this ball of light kind of like moving in my chest. And as it opened, like tears just started running out of my eyes. And it was like a very healing thing. And I was like, okay, more of that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that. That's a profound experience that not everybody gets to have.
It was needed at the time because I felt like a dried out sponge.
Yeah.
I had been trying so hard to do everything right, make the money, do the career.
Surface. Have
the house, have the things. And as that, some of that was, I was going to say some of it, all of it was going away. And I was hitting that dark night. It was like, what do I have? I have the ability to breathe. I have my body. I have my own self to connect with. And so I was drawn in two directions. One was the Human Awareness Institute, also known as HI. I had gone to one of their workshops, being drawn to like, my wife and I went at the time, like, hey, let's do one of these workshops while we're out in California that we'll see like on HBO's Real Sex. And and it was a
nice callback, Tony. Deep cut on that one for me.
Yeah, right.
The days when you get a free HBO weekend and your parents went to sleep.
Exactly, right. Now it's like streaming everywhere on your phone. And so we went to this clothing optional workshop, and it was not about sex. It was about love and intimacy, and people were being at choice. And I felt it was one of the safest places I'd experienced in my life. And so when we broke up, I was like, I remembered that because we broke up, and everything was hitting at the same time. The house was in foreclosure, brand new Jeep repossessed, income went to 1/10 of what it was with the market crashing. And
it's like
I was like,
crash and burn.
Absolutely.
Let it crumble.
It was the tower in the tarot cards, and it was life was like, this house of cards you built, smacked it off the table.
Wow.
And it was there. And in the study with APCT, and that I began to feel like where I could work with what's real and work with what's real. I'll just leave it there.
I just want to clarify for our audience what APTC is, because everyone's like, what is that acronym? It's Advanced Psychosomatic Character Therapy, that all three of us on this podcast, Alex and I, and Tony previous, have all taken with our mentor, Kurt Hill. So just wanted to clarify that, because people are like, what is APTC?
And we try to demystify like words that we use a lot. So like dark night of the soul, how would you both define that different than like a rough patch, which I think I heard it in Tony's explanation there a second ago. But like some people haven't heard these terms before, dark night of the soul. Like, how is it different than just like, oh, I've had a few bad days?
Go for it, Natalie.
Well, I love the way you explained that. It's like the tower. It's like spirit's going to come in and just crumble every construct that you think you are. It's like, nope, that's not who you are. We're going to take that away, because your worth is inside of you. It is not wrapped up in the constructs or the surface stuff.
Yeah, that you're doing for other people.
But it's painful, because where I think the major pain comes from is the gripping onto that stuff.
Yes.
The pain is like the ego desperately gripping, holding. I can't let this go. When you let go, it's like love fills. Love comes in, and it's like, it's profound. For me, that's been my experience, and I feel like I've been through quite a few dark nights of the souls, in many different layers. But people often think that the pain is, I don't know. For me, I'm going to explain it that the way that I feel it. It's the pain of holding on to it. It's like the ego is like, I don't want to let this go, but the pain is that the letting go is when the real surrender. That's when it's like, it's juicy and like it's soft, and it's soft. It is so soft in the body. You're just like, oh, there I am. That it's like that remembering of who you are. For me, that's what it is. It's like when the dark night soul crumbles, it's like, boom, the light comes in.
Yes. Oh, I love the way you wove all of that together.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's that grip, it's and I use that phrase too. It's like, where am I gripping onto things, either emotionally or with my
body and
my ears, even my, like my eye, like relax your grip, bro. But and also with like the body work, like giving people massage. Sometimes they're holding on to things because it's that I was thinking like, what people listening might be going like, oh yeah, that dark night of the soul. That sounds like a lot of fun,
Yeah, I'm not
let's
going
do
there.
that. Yeah,
not signing up for that.
Right, but that's not the painful part. That's like the pain is avoiding it, and letting go is like the relief, and on the other side of it is pleasure and connection, and that's where it becomes like I want to say sublime, and that to me is the metaphor of kintsugi. The Japanese pottery form, where they'll take a vessel and then break it and heal it with gold, or mend it with gold. That's like us humans, but they value the mended vessel, the healed vessel is worth more than the vessel that's never been broken.
Wow.
And so for the people that are listening, what if your value was worth so much more than you think it is? What if who you think you are is not who you truly are, or the gift that you are to the world? And if you're even thinking like, I'm no gift to the world, yes, you are. And perhaps it's the letting go of those constructs that we think keep us safe that will allow us to open up into the full, blossoming of our lives to get all,
fucking goosebumps, man. That was awesome.
Yeah. Oh. And I want to go back to what you said, like body work, because I love body work. And
me too.
And during one of my previous dark nights of the soul, when I was actually was in Chicago, when I was kind of uncovering a lot of my wounding and my trauma, And we're going to see you, Tony. The value of body work is so important because you got into a part on my trap in my neck. And as you were kind of like gently digging and kind of using your intuition, guiding in my energy, in my body, you gently hit a spot on me. And that created a flood of like a big emotional release. And it was kind of triggering all of, not triggering, but it was bringing up a lot of the lack of memory and the traumas that I had not been able to access. And it's so powerful when you get into body work, how you can free somebody's experience in that. So I want to thank you dearly for that, because it was a big moment for me in one of my dark nights of the souls.
Thank you. It's an honor, and thank you for sharing that. I think that's one of the things I love about body work is that it's no words. It doesn't have to be words.
Yeah.
And I've experienced in my own, even somatic work with someone sitting across from me, and they never touched me, but I had some feelings coming up about, as I was just kind of meditating and feeling into my body, there was feelings coming up about my son and how I want to do all of the things that I want, and like connection and being a great dad and those things, but some real tenderness opened up. And my dear friend Helen, who is a sage in her own right, and she was like, just notice, allow those fragile feelings to move anywhere they want in the body. They're just bringing information.
Yeah.
And as that information is acknowledged, then they're free to go. And you don't have to do anything about it. And so her coaching to me on that, I've taken to every other session, whether I say it or not. There's that's intimacy, and being, even being present for someone's own exploration into their inner world it's an honor to be present for that. And it's not our job to guide, or we can companion, but not necessarily prescribe or try to be like, it's got to be like this and this is what it's supposed to look like, because that's mirroring the world that we are just breaking out of.
Yeah, and that's interesting you say that, because it's like I feel like we're moving again into more of this divine feminine energy coming in, where we're allowing and letting go, surrendering, allowing, letting go, instead of forcing and fixing, which is
I would also say it's more feeling as well, bottom up rather than top down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. There's I feel like there's a big surge for people are going to be wanting more felt experiences, like what, because in this world where we have AI now that can write a term paper in 3 minutes or less.
Bananas. It's totally bananas that it's here.
It is. It's really wild, but it's also kind of like a what if everything you say is true? It's like make it so. It's like the holodeck from Star Trek. Where
right.
And it's like, and so all of this content is coming out from healers and coaches, and humanity is going to be wanting more feeling, more, where do you bleed? Where is your, and it's not about like creating pain, but it's about sharing on a real vulnerable level. That's what creates intimacy, and that's what allows connection. And so I feel like that's more than the razzle dazzle, like here's my program for blah, 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 it's more about facilitating in purpose, and trying to create those opportunities. And so I'm actually kind of working on I am working on a project this summer that is with the local athletic club, where we're using their pool and adjacent steam room to do clothing optional, both some yoga practices and some contact improv, like floating in the water. There'll be music in the water, so that people can really drop into themselves and soak into the, hopefully more so the frequency of who they are, rather than it being about like trying to connect with others. And that's the part I've been sifting through, is like how to present it so that it's not about like show up and get naked and connect with others or bring your partner. It's not a couples workshop. It's not a sexuality workshop.
Yeah.
It is about somatic safety. So about emptying trauma. It's about intimacy. It's about supporting each other in that space. It's about diversity, the diversity of bodies, the diversity of human experience, and that common container of like mutual support. So there's a saying about like, I don't get naked in a setting like that to reveal myself to others. I may choose to get naked in that setting to reveal myself to myself.
Oh, I love that.
And
That's
I'm really
powerful.
that's the vibe I'm going for.
Well, it's one thing I admire about you, Tony, is like, we're talking about sex, and sex is something, I think we talk about it in a pornographic sense in some ways. And I think we're coming into like understanding our own sexuality better. But there's not a lot of people who do what you do, and you're walking a very fine line. Especially, Natalie and I've talked plenty of times. There's people that don't know how to use that energy, and there's plenty of like weird, we were actually referencing you in like one of the first episodes. Like, you're one of these people who's so in line with themselves, you know how to walk that line with your energy, and sexual energy. For me, it's like you're playing. It's that part in Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse where like he's got his head in the blast radiator, and then all the Spider-Mans come out from that fragmentary point, right?
Nice.
That's kind of like playing with sexual energy, and you are a master of walking that line. So if anybody's going to do it, man, it's you, because I don't know anybody who does what you do.
Thank you. And I've fucked up plenty of times. Like, honestly, like I fumble, and like, it's like, how do I realign, and I have people that I can check in with, my circle. And like, that's what, hearing that first podcast. And I heard the reference, and I was like, yes, that. And like, these are great questions to like really be able to be like, well, here's where I'm like, like I'm trying to grow, or where I think I may have fucked up, or these kinds of things. And when I say that's a whole big thing. But what I'll say is that I've learned. I mean, there are different. Well, I'll go back to one other thing you said, Alex, and that was that's what do you call it, where all the Spider-Men?
It's like the Kingpin's got this thing. It's like this nuclear accelerator or something, where it's opening this hole into like other dimensions. Yeah.
That's what sexual energy does. I mean, it creates whole humans. It creates, sexual energy, and it creates worlds. And so people are learning to do what they call sex magic, or they're learning to do, we're now beginning to call Tantra, which is some people call Neo-Tantra. But Tantra is like it's the weaving together of all of the sacred and the profane. And so the first Tantrikas were, they're like, we're not supposed to do drugs. We're going to do all the drugs. We're not supposed to fight. They would actually fight to find the sacredness within that conflict. And
sounds like my kind of party.
Yeah. They were Tantra thugs. That's what they called themselves.
Wow.
And they were like, we're not supposed to have sex. We're going to do all the sex having. And so, but out of that, it was like weaving together the sacred and the profane. And in our Western society, we can feel sexual energy. Whereas we might not, when some practitioner is like, feel the energy of the lake, or feel the energy of the tree. Sometimes people are like, what? That's, it doesn't, there's no felt sense for it. Right. So that's why I feel like people gravitate towards sexuality and sexual energy. And then it's like learning to let go of our expectations, our hungers, acknowledge the hunger. Yeah. It's okay to be hungry. It's okay to want connection. It's okay to be horny.
But I love that, because it's like you're really integrating the dark and the light, the shadow, and all these parts of what sex is and sexuality and creator energy, and you're holding it all.
So what we're trying to do, and I say we, like there are some teachers and facilitators that I know that we're working on doing that. We did a retreat last fall called Pleasure Alchemy. We're doing it again this fall in Saugatuck, Michigan, over the equinox. And so we're going to have some rituals that will intended to create an environment of safety and vulnerability, and not overt. I try to put things in the positive. I'll say this, and not overt sexuality. It's more the positivity of being able to have all of the feelings and be able to feel and talk and share, but then have the safety of like not having to perform.
Gotcha. Can you give our audience a little bit more of an in-depth kind of explanation of what pleasure alchemy is?
I will try. So to me, pleasure alchemy is using pleasure as healing modalities. And that is, you described it very well. It's like bringing that softness on the other side of the dark night of the soul to the acute places that need healing, as sort of as a catalyst or a safety container, so that pleasure alchemy is about connecting to our desires, our inspiration, but also being willing to go into the void, the darkness, the places where we're wounded, and acknowledge and then empty, then allow. So that's the alchemy part. It's a transformational part. And that, as you were just mentioning, Alex, or we were just talking about how the spark of sexuality is like what creates whole humans. That's the alchemy. That's the transformational part. So I hope I'm doing an okay job.
You're doing an amazing job. I have questions that I want to dive into.
Yeah,
that's
please.
Cool. So when you think about the suppression of our sexuality in Western culture, how do you feel that has shown up in such harmful ways?
Wow. Oh, that's big.
I know. It's like, where do I start with that one?
Yeah.
So this is a whole other podcast.
It's a huge thing, but and it's all connected, like, right? So sexuality, is often related to our second chakra. Our second chakra is about all of our relationships with everything, including our relationship with ourselves. And for those who have felt a need to control, without getting into that was good, that was bad, right or wrong, there have been efforts, mechanisms, dynamics put into place that have told people to settle down and act appropriately. And so with certain political and religious things, it became inappropriate to have certain sexual practices, or let me try to like hone in on that a little bit more. It's so ingrained, much like our religious framework is so colonized with white Jesus and and the moral majority who is neither, and all of these things. Without getting into like any kind of ranting, there are people who, as a society, we have taught people to only project from the chest up. The neck up. The neck up.
The neck up, the rationalization of everything.
Rationalize everything. And if you go below the neck, only give it as love out to the world. But we're not taught to necessarily love ourselves. We're not necessarily taught to have strength and power. We're not taught about having healthy, pleasurable sexuality. And that is that neglecting it is what perverts things. Yeah. So we're hopefully growing up as a people so that we can have adult conversations and open in clarity, so that people can unpack where they have felt shame.
And that's what I always say, that when things are suppressed or they're in the shadows, that shadow is going to drive you from behind. It's going to drive you in unconscious ways. And I think that a lot of what we're seeing is a lot of our sexual behavior, it's not coming from a place of love.
Right.
It is, there's a lot of programming to unpack in sexuality that I think is, if there isn't a safe space for it, it's going to remain hidden.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, is that what pleasure alchemy is like opening that space in a container of love so that you can explore all parts of sexuality and its nature and transmuting things that may not be in alignment with you?
Yeah, there can be definitely that would be like a focus on sexuality, but there's also a place in pleasure alchemy for unpacking things that aren't necessarily, we may not see a direct connection to our sexuality. And there are people who cannot speak of their genitals without saying down there, you know, and it's like this other realm, you know, like, you know, take me through the Hobbit world or whatever to get to down there, you know.
Right.
Yeah, not to sound like a nerd, Tony, it would be more like the dwarves, probably. But
yeah. Land of the giants.
Hey, I've been in your bathroom downstairs. I've seen that photo. but yeah, I mean, like, so like being able to talk about those things and without it necessarily being intrusive or like, oh my gosh, I have to talk about these things now. It doesn't, no. But if something is showing up and we can have, so I think by unpacking some of these things and Natalie, like to what you were saying, like, there was a person, I can't, trying to think of her name, Elizabeth Markle said that unacknowledged hunger in men shows up as creepiness. I know a few of those guys.
Yeah.
I've experienced a few of those guys.
You know,
send me some of the dating profile pictures. It's crazy.
Oh my gosh, right? But in real talk, I've been that guy, or at least felt like that guy. I haven't necessarily been like sending unsolicited pics and all those things, but being in a room and like having a hunger and not acknowledging it, people will feel like, oh my gosh, this energy is so intense or whatever. So being able to acknowledge takes a certain level of vulnerability, it takes a certain level of, I
think what you just said right there actually really clarifies what pleasure alchemy is, because it's taking our natural urges, some of those urges, and not hiding them.
Right.
I mean, there's so much shame around sexuality, and there's so much to unpack in it.
There's one, like I try to think about, like, as I put together the materials to make it available to folks, like, so if I were talking with you both, like, what would it take and under what circumstances would you see yourself participating in any sort of clothing optional environment?
For me, having a spouse, there's part of me that feels like I have an obligation only to be naked with my spouse.
Okay.
I mean, like, it's different. Like, I think if it was like a sauna or something like that, but I think it's weird on like some level. Like, I speak for myself only, that like you feel that your nakedness belongs to somebody else.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's fascinating.
That's
a fascinating comment. Yeah. Not a bad comment, not a good, just fascinating. That's pretty profound what you just said.
It is.
Not all dick jokes all the time, guys.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
I would engage in something like that. I think the former part of me would not, but I mean, I'm single. I think, I can understand your comment, Alex, because if I was in a relationship, I would not do that. But that's just my preference, my ideals, maybe more my traditions. I don't know, but now being single, I would definitely explore that. And I guess depending on the person that I do bring into my life, if that is an option, maybe I don't know. I'm open.
Well, and I think it's different if your spouse knows the facilitator, right? So my wife, in the context. So my wife Biddy had this great idea, because like the Chicago dojo, you go up a flight of stairs. It's this gorgeous environment there on West Chicago, and it can be kind of intimidating. We've got our gis on, and then you're wearing like this hakama, which is this like samurai style skirt. And then you got people coming up to you. And my wife's like, so psychologically, you already have to come up the stairs. then you have to interact with these people who are wearing these different type of attire, so they have kind of a status thing over you. And she's like, so what if there was just the meet and greet where you're hanging out with people without all your, the robing and stuff like that makes you differentiate yourself. So you bring people in so that they see you and they see the cool community for what it is, and that they feel trusted that they can come back on the mat. So eliminate the barriers for intimidation.
Yeah. And I love the intent, what I'm hearing is the intent of honoring your relationship with saying we're sharing, this is something that we only share with each other. And what you said about the honorifics, the clothes that we wear as a way of showing status or not. So what if in a yoga class, and like Lululemon was like, oh, it's showing a certain level of status, or and what if, like your wife said, what if like we could go and hang out with folks without the things that separate us from being ways that we signal status.
Everybody has to dress frumpy to get in.
Everybody, potato sacks for everyone.
Yeah. Paper bag princess.
Yeah.
So as you're talking about all the many cool things that you do that make you who you are, Tony, like how do you even begin to bring people back to who they are?
I think we've kind of touched on it a couple of times, but I would say emptying is like helping to facilitate that. And sometimes people need to like come in and just like vent verbally and clear their head. Sometimes people need to have gentle energy work. Sometimes they just need presence and being heard. Sometimes they need touch, but it's all designed, or listening, feeling in is the root word of the word consent. So that's something that's been really juicing my brain lately in a good way is consent means to be present with someone and feel in, sentier, feeling in with each other. And that to me is part of healing. It's also part of when we talk about diversity work and balancing and creating equity. That's part of bringing people back to who they are, back into balance. But it's also creating a sense of, or helping to facilitate, make it easier to feel like we belong, and we can belong to ourselves first.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. And then from there, we can feel into like other areas,
Right. And that's like that coming back to the self and feeling. I can see in a lot of your work, whether it's in the Pleasure Alchemy workshops or the naked yoga, you're really helping people feel so safe in their vulnerability that they love all parts of themselves in that moment, that's where that true connection starts to flourish.
Yeah, Natalie. I mean,
that's beautiful, Tony.
I'm going to be really transparent. And like one of my fears is that I'm performing. And so I want to be authentic, and I want to belong in that first. And if I have people that I trust, like both of you, and I'm talking, I'm like, you know what? I feel like I'm performing right now. Is this, and like, no, get out of here, whatever. That's another way of like holding each other. So when you're holding someone's heart, and let alone their sexuality, the sexuality can be in the heart. But you're holding someone's heart, you're really holding a world, a universe. And we get to, I think there is real magic and potential in that when we can, that resonates, that makes sense. You're not crazy, you're not wrong, and like we get to discard all of those things where we've been gaslit by society and like telling us what we're supposed to be doing, and you shouldn't feel that way, and whatever those are, but when someone's present and holding, it's intimacy, and it's transformative. And I really do believe that we can affect the greater world from that potent place in us. And I just want to like, yoga used to be considered a martial art because yoga means to yoke together. So when the practitioner is yoking within themselves, belonging to themselves, and practicing that form of presence, it became impossible to be violent in their presence.
Wow.
Whoa.
Yeah, and that's what I want to bring back, Jedi yoga.
I love that. I agree. I think the more, I think that's the purpose of all of our work is, bringing people back to themselves. So collectively, it changes the outer.
Yeah, because there's so much content out there. There's so much frizzle frazzle that we can get lost in the sauce. And like the work that you're both doing, the work that we're all doing is about bringing people back to themselves and back to what's real and building from there.
That's exactly what we're doing with the podcast. That's what we're trying to do. That's the goal of it.
Yeah,
I think it's beautiful.
So Tony, what are you offering right now? Where can people find you? Tell us a little bit about where your studio is, all that stuff, all that good stuff.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Well, I'm in Northwest Evanston, in Chicagoland, near Northwestern University. I do Zoom all around. So I do virtual meetings, but I also travel often to California and different places to do facilitation for DEI. But people can find me and my social media on my website, which is www.thelovewarrior.com. And the two projects that I'm most excited about, and I'm practicing like pleasure alchemy, and so it's feeling into like, so the first project is aquatic alchemy, which is the pool and sauna setting that'll be a clothing optional environment for people to experience being in a weightless environment, and also shedding some of the internal grip that weight baggage that we've been carrying. And we'll have space holders for that and consent monitors, etc. So I really want to have that be a safe container. The second project is the Pleasure Alchemy Retreat, which is in Saugatuck, Michigan, and that will be from September 21st to the 24th. And that information will be up on my website before the weekend is out. And people can, there'll be lodging and there'll be facilitators that will also be sharing their offerings, and we'll have drumming and some ceremony and pool and etc.
Sounds amazing. Yeah. Sounds wonderful.
And if you had, so we want to make sure everybody's doing homework as part of like they're practicing, and Natalie and I are practicing what you're talking about. So
we're the students. We're also the students. Eternal.
Yay!
5 minutes for us and people listening to reconnect, to get a better sense of embodiment, or just in general, 5 minutes a day of something that would have benefit.
Like a tidbit.
A tidbit, sure. I'm going to say two things. One is tune into frequency. Like we all emit a frequency. And we change the frequency when we walk into an environment. What I mean by that is notice what's in your environment, notice what's happening inside of you. And then the second part is notice what's heavy, notice what's light. So if you were to, and this can be done anytime, preferably if you're driving, keep your eyes open, but otherwise close your eyes and allow yourself to just notice without judgment the places in your body that feel more dense or heavy, and begin to just allow that heaviness to be heavy and let it drop to the lower belly, let it drop toward the tailbone, and imagine or even move your hands or your arms to help it drop from the tailbone through your chair, through the floor. Imagine it dropping all the way to the heart of the earth. This is a Peruvian practice where they say that only humans can create heavy energy. Mm-hmm. And and which makes sense, but I love that they don't have a negative connotation to heavy.
Right.
And they say that when we give it away, Yeah.
Just heavy energy. That's what
It's
it is.
just heavy. Yep. And so we can give it away and like let it drop into the heart of the earth without worrying about like, oh, I left my crap there or whatever. And so that's the emptying part. Just empty what feels heavy and then invite in. Use your imagination. Kurt likes to say imagination gives shape, form, and texture to unformed mental energy. So imagine a stream of ease, of flow, effortless flow coming in and pooling around your heart, and let it be expansive. It's effortlessly expansive, and allow that to move into the places that once held heavy. And everything that's heavy, if you're a visual thinker, just see it dropping away like in beauty in nature. I like to envision leaves falling or flower petals dropping or fruit, or sometimes I surprise myself, a mango.
I love it. And, you know, Tony, so every time we start this podcast with a guest, before we hit the record button, we do a kind of a guided meditation to make sure all of our energy is coherent, that we're all not on the same page, but just that, you know, we're in the same vibe. And
unity without uniformity, to quote another person we quote a million times.
Yeah. And we actually asked Tony to do it before the podcast today.
And it was beautiful.
It was a really beautiful meditation. And I mean, I think it's testament to how well and beautiful this podcast flowed today. And we're so honored to have you. What a beautiful conversation. And yeah, thank you so much. Our audience is going to love this wisdom.
Yes. And to reiterate, Tony, thank you for your beauty, your work, your wisdom, and your vulnerability, man. Thank you.
Thank you both. You really created a space where it felt safe to show up and just flow and not have to perform. I just wish you both, I hope that this continues to just emanate and, you know, find the people that it's meant to find. And if you're listening right now, that's you. And so, yay. Anyway.
Well, you're welcome back whenever you want, man. This is so much fun.
I would love to come back. I'd love to see you both.
Yeah. And so if you're wanting to know more about Tony, the show notes will highlight all of his links and where you can find him. He's doing incredible work. And thank you so much for being here on the podcast with us.
Thank you both. Thank you both. Yeah. Love you.
Love you too.
Love you too. Okay.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Huffing Spirit Podcast. Remember, you are your own teacher. Take what resonates and leave the rest. For more info, follow us on Instagram at Huffing Spirit Podcast and subscribe on Spotify or iTunes. Bye for now.